She was being evicted. Then a stranger on the subway made this insane proposal. Have you ever wondered how a single act of kindness could completely change your life? What if I told you that one woman's decision to help a stranger on a crowded subway would lead her down a path she never imagined? Stay with me because this story will take you through unexpected twists, heartbreak, and a love that defies all logic. Before we dive in, let me ask you, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And trust me, you'll want to stick around until the very end because what happens in the final moments will leave you speechless. Now, let's begin. The subway car was packed, as it always was during rush hour in New York City. Rebecca Martinez pressed herself against the cold metal pole, her backpack heavy with library books she'd checked out during her lunch break. The November air outside had been biting, but inside the train it was stifling. A dense mix of body heat and winter coats that made breathing feel like work. She was exhausted. 3 job interviews that week, all ending with the same polite rejection. Her savings account was down to double digits, and her landlord had started leaving increasingly pointed notes under her door about the rent that was now 6 weeks overdue. But Rebecca had learned long ago that showing desperation never helped anyone, so she kept her head down, focused on the book in her hands, and pretended that everything was fine. That's when she heard it. A child's piercing scream, the kind that cuts through every other sound and makes everyone in proximity wince. Rebecca looked up from her book to see a man in an expensive charcoal suit, probably in his mid-30s, struggling with a little boy who couldn't have been more than 3 years old. The child was thrashing, his face red and streaked with tears, his small fists pounding against his father's chest. The man looked utterly lost, his designer tie slightly askew, his perfectly styled dark hair now disheveled from what had clearly been an extended battle. Around them, passengers were shooting looks that ranged from sympathetic to openly annoyed. One woman moved to the far end of the car with an exaggerated huff. Another man turned up his headphones so loud Rebecca could hear the bass from 3 feet away. "Please, Oliver," the man was saying, his voice strained with exhaustion and embarrassment. "We're almost there. Just a few more stops." But Oliver had no interest in logic or timelines. He wanted out, and he wanted out now. His cries grew louder, more desperate, and Rebecca watched as the man's composure crumbled piece by piece. She should mind her own business. That's what you did in New York. You kept your head down, stayed in your lane, and didn't get involved in other people's problems. But there was something about the raw helplessness in the man's eyes, something about the way he held his son like he was terrified of doing the wrong thing, that made Rebecca close her book and stand up. "Excuse me," she said, approaching carefully. The man looked at her with a mixture of hope and suspicion. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to intrude, but would you mind if I tried something?" He hesitated, looking down at Oliver, who was now hiccuping between sobs. "I've tried everything. Snacks, toys, promises of ice cream, nothing works. Sometimes kids just need a distraction from a different source," Rebecca said gently. "May I?" After a moment, the man nodded, clearly desperate enough to try anything. Rebecca crouched down to Oliver's eye level, careful not to invade his space too quickly. She waited until his sobbing had reduced to shuddering breaths. Then she pulled out her phone and opened a simple app she'd downloaded months ago when she used to volunteer at the children's library. "Oliver," she said softly, "do you like animals?" The little boy's tear-filled eyes flickered toward her with cautious interest. Rebecca took that as permission and held up her phone, where animated forest creatures were dancing across the screen. Oliver's crying stuttered to a stop. His eyes widened as he watched a cartoon rabbit hop across lily pads. "That's Barnaby the bunny," Rebecca explained, her voice calm and soothing. "He's looking for his friends in the forest. Can you help him find them?" She tapped the screen, and the rabbit bounced toward a tree where a squirrel was hiding. Oliver leaned forward, his small hand reaching out tentatively to touch the screen. When he tapped it and the squirrel popped out with a cheerful sound, Oliver's face transformed. The red, tear-streaked misery gave way to pure wonder. He giggled, a sound so sweet and unexpected that several nearby passengers actually smiled. Rebecca sat with Oliver for the next 10 minutes, guiding him through the simple game, making up stories about each animal they found. By the time the train pulled into the next station, Oliver was completely calm, sitting peacefully in his father's lap and still staring at the phone with fascination. "I don't know how to thank you," the man said as Rebecca stood to move back to her spot. His voice was thick with relief and something else, something that sounded almost like admiration. "So you just saved me from what was rapidly becoming my worst nightmare." "It's no problem," Rebecca said with a small smile. "Kids just need patience and distraction. He's a sweet boy." "I'm Daniel," the man said, shifting Oliver in his arms to extend his hand. "Daniel Thornton. Rebecca Martinez." She shook his hand, noting the expensive watch on his wrist and the wedding ring that was notably absent. "And this little guy is Oliver?" "Yes, my son." Daniel looked down at Oliver with an expression that was equal parts love and exhaustion. "We're still figuring each other out." Before Rebecca could ask what that meant, the train lurched to a stop at her station. "This is me," she said, gathering her things. "Good luck with the rest of your trip." "Wait," Daniel said quickly, fumbling in his pocket. He pulled out a business card and pressed it into her hand. "If you ever need anything at all, please reach out. I owe you one." Rebecca glanced at the card. Thornton Industries, Chief Executive Officer. Her eyebrows rose slightly, but she just nodded, slipped the card into her pocket, and stepped off the train. As the doors closed behind her, she looked back one more time to see Daniel waving, Oliver's small hand mimicking the gesture. She smiled to herself as she climbed the stairs to street level, already dismissing the encounter as just another strange New York moment. Little did she know that the card burning a hole in her pocket would become her lifeline, and that Daniel Thornton was about to become much more than a grateful stranger on a train. 3 days later, Rebecca sat in her tiny studio apartment, staring at the eviction notice that had been taped to her door that morning. 30 days to vacate. The words seemed to pulse on the page, mocking her with their finality. She'd known it was coming, but seeing it in writing made it real in a way that was hard to breathe around. Her phone buzzed with another rejection email. "Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to move forward with other candidates." She didn't even bother reading the rest. It was always the same polite brush-off, the same corporate speak that basically meant, "You're not good enough." Rebecca closed her laptop and looked around her apartment. It wasn't much. A studio in Queens with a window that faced a brick wall, a kitchen that was really just a hot plate and a mini fridge, and a bathroom where the shower only had 2 settings, scalding or freezing. But it was hers, or at least it had been for the past 2 years, and the thought of losing it made her throat tight. She picked up her phone, scrolling mindlessly through job listings she'd already applied to, through social media posts from college friends who seemed to have their lives figured out, through everything and nothing, until her eyes landed on her wallet sitting on the coffee table. Inside was Daniel Thornton's business card. "If you ever need anything," he'd said. But he was just being polite, wasn't he? Rich people said things like that all the time, casual promises they never expected anyone to actually take them up on. She'd be crazy to call him. Absolutely insane. They'd spent maybe 15 minutes together on a subway car. He probably didn't even remember her name. But as Rebecca looked at the eviction notice again, as she calculated how many meals she could afford before her next unemployment check came in, as she faced the very real possibility of being homeless in one of the most expensive cities in the world, she realized she didn't have the luxury of pride anymore. With shaking hands, she pulled out the card and dialed the number before she could talk herself out of it. It rang 3 times, and Rebecca was about to hang up when a professional voice answered. "Thornton Industries, Mr. Thornton's office. How may I direct your call?" My name is Rebecca Martinez. I met Mr. Thornton a few days ago, and he gave me his card. I don't know if he'll remember me, but hold, please." The line went silent for a moment, then another voice came on, warm and immediately recognizable. Rebecca. From the subway. "Yes," she said, surprised he'd taken the call personally. "I'm sorry to bother you. I know you're probably busy." "Not at all," Daniel interrupted. "I'm glad you called. Is everything all right?" Rebecca closed her eyes, fighting the urge to just hang up and pretend this never happened. "Actually, no. Things aren't great, and I know this is completely inappropriate, but you said if I ever needed anything, and I just thought maybe, I don't know what I thought. This was a mistake. I'm sorry." "Rebecca, wait, don't hang up." Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. "Tell me what's going on." And so she did. The words tumbled out in a rush, the job rejections, the eviction notice, the desperate financial situation she'd found herself in despite having a master's degree and years of experience. She told him things she hadn't told anyone, not her friends back home in Arizona, not her former roommate who'd moved to California, not even her mother who called every Sunday asking if she'd made it yet in the big city. When she finally stopped talking, there was a long silence on the other end. Rebecca felt her face burning with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she said again. "I shouldn't have dumped all of that on you. Please just forget I called." "Rebecca, I have a proposal for you." Daniel's voice was thoughtful, measured, "and I want you to hear me out before you say no." "Okay," she said warily. "I need help with Oliver. Full-time help. My last 3 nannies quit within a month because Oliver is a challenging child. He doesn't trust easily, and he's been through a lot. But you managed to calm him down in minutes, something none of the professionals I've hired could do. I'd like to offer you the position, room and board included, plus a salary that I think you'll find more than fair." Rebecca's mind reeled. "You want me to be your nanny, but I'm not trained. I don't have any childcare certifications or, you have something better. You have a natural connection with my son. That's what he needs right now. Not someone with a resume full of credentials. Think about it. You'd have a place to live, a steady income, and time to figure out your next career move without the pressure of immediate survival. Daniel, I don't know what to say. Say you'll at least come meet Oliver properly. Have dinner with us tomorrow night. See the house, see what the job would entail, and then make your decision, no pressure." Rebecca looked around her tiny apartment, at the eviction notice, at the life that was slowly slipping through her fingers, despite her best efforts to hold on. What did she have to lose? "Okay," she said finally. "I'll come to dinner." "Excellent. I'll have my driver pick you up at 6. And Rebecca, thank you for calling. I have a feeling this is going to work out perfectly." After she hung up, Rebecca sat in stunned silence. Had that really just happened? Had she really just agreed to have dinner at a stranger's house? To potentially become a live-in nanny for a child she'd spent all of 15 minutes with? It was crazy. Absolutely crazy. But then again, everything about her life lately had been crazy. And at least this particular brand of insanity came with a solution to her most pressing problems. She'd go to dinner, she decided. She'd meet Oliver again, see the house, and make a rational, informed decision like the adult she was supposed to be. What Rebecca didn't know, as she laid awake that night trying to imagine what Daniel Thornton's house might look like, was that this decision would change everything. Not just her living situation or her bank account, but the very foundation of who she thought she was and what she thought she wanted from life. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again, and Rebecca Martinez was about to walk through one that would lead her somewhere she never expected to go. The next evening, a sleek black car pulled up in front of Rebecca's building at exactly 6 o'clock. The driver, a kind-faced man in his 50s who introduced himself as James, helped her into the back seat with the sort of practiced courtesy that spoke of years in service to wealthy families. First time to the Thornton estate? James asked as they pulled into traffic. Yes, Rebecca admitted, smoothing down the nicest dress she owned, a simple navy blue number she'd worn to job interviews. What's it like? James smiled in the rearview mirror. It's a home, Miss Martinez. A beautiful one, to be sure, but Mr. Thornton has always been more interested in comfort than showing off. You'll see. They drove for about 40 minutes, leaving the crowded streets of the city behind for the tree-lined suburbs of Westchester County. When they finally turned into a long driveway, Rebecca's breath caught. The house was stunning. A sprawling colonial-style mansion with warm lights glowing from the windows, making it look less like a showpiece and more like something out of a storybook. Daniel was waiting on the front steps, Oliver in his arms. He'd traded his suit for dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, and Rebecca was struck by how different he looked. More relaxed, more approachable, though the worry lines around his eyes suggested that relaxation was still a work in progress. Rebecca, welcome. He came down the steps to greet her, Oliver peeking shyly from behind his father's shoulder. I hope the drive wasn't too bad. It was fine, thank you. Rebecca smiled at Oliver. Hi, Oliver. Do you remember me from the train? Oliver studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Bunny game, he whispered. Rebecca's heart melted. That's right, the bunny game. Maybe we can play again later if you want. Oliver nodded more enthusiastically this time, and Daniel's expression softened with what looked like relief. Let's head inside. Dinner's almost ready, though I should warn you that my cooking skills are limited to things that can be grilled or ordered from very good restaurants. The inside of the house was even more impressive than the exterior, but Daniel had been right. Despite the obvious wealth evident in every piece of furniture and artwork, it felt like a home. There were toys scattered across the living room floor, children's books stacked on the coffee table, and family photos covering nearly every surface. Rebecca found herself drawn to these photos, studying them as Daniel went to check on dinner. Most were of Oliver at various ages, from newborn to present, but there were others too, older ones, showing a beautiful blonde woman with a brilliant smile, Daniel and the woman on their wedding day. The woman pregnant, glowing, Daniel's hand on her belly. The woman holding a newborn Oliver, looking down at him with such profound love it made Rebecca's chest ache. That's Emma. Daniel's voice came from behind her, soft and careful. Oliver's mother, my wife. Rebecca turned to find him standing in the doorway, Oliver playing with blocks on the floor nearby. She asked gently. She died during childbirth. Complications that no one saw coming until it was too late. Daniel's voice was matter-of-fact, but Rebecca could hear the ocean of pain beneath it. One moment we were laughing about what color to paint the nursery, and the next, I was being told I had a son and no wife. Daniel, I'm so sorry. He nodded, his jaw tight. It's been 3 years. Some days are easier than others. But Oliver, he's the best part of her, the best part of both of us. And I'm determined to give him the life she would have wanted him to have, even if I'm making it up as I go along. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. Daniel had ordered from an Italian restaurant, and they ate pasta and shared stories while Oliver alternated between eating his food and building elaborate structures with his breadsticks. Rebecca found herself laughing more than she had in months, and by the time they'd finished dessert, the initial awkwardness had completely dissolved. So, Daniel said after Oliver had been put to bed, his small hand insisting that Rebecca come too to read him one more story. What do you think? Could you see yourself here? They were sitting in the living room now, the fire crackling in the fireplace, 2 glasses of wine on the table between them. Rebecca had kicked off her shoes at some point, and she realized she felt more comfortable in this mansion than she had in her own apartment lately. Can I be honest? She asked. Please. This whole situation is completely surreal. I barely know you, and you're offering me a live-in position taking care of your son based on one interaction on a subway car. It feels like the setup for a movie, not real life. Daniel laughed. I know it does. Believe me, my lawyer thinks I've lost my mind. But Rebecca, I've been through 7 nannies in the past year. 7. All of them came with perfect credentials, glowing references, years of experience, and every single one of them quit because they couldn't connect with Oliver. He'd cry whenever they came near him, refuse to eat, refuse to sleep. It was a nightmare for everyone involved. And you think I'll be different? I know you will be. I saw it on the train. Oliver responded to you in a way he hasn't responded to anyone since Emma died. That's not something you can fake or learn from a textbook. It's just who you are. Rebecca took a sip of her wine, buying herself time to think. What would my responsibilities be, exactly? Taking care of Oliver during the day while I'm at work, getting him to preschool and picking him up, making sure he eats, naps, plays, all the usual things. I have a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who handles the cleaning and laundry, and a cook who prepares meals most nights. Your only job would be Oliver. And I'd live here? There's a guest suite on the 2nd floor, completely private. Bedroom, bathroom, sitting room. It's yours for as long as you want it. Daniel leaned forward, his expression earnest. Look, I know this is a big ask, and I know you have other plans for your career. But I'm offering you a chance to regroup, to save money, to figure out your next move without the stress of worrying about rent or food or any of that. Take the job, stay for a few months, and when you find something in your field, we'll part as friends. No hard feelings. It sounded too good to be true, which usually meant it was. But as Rebecca thought about her eviction notice, her dwindling bank account, her growing desperation, she realized she didn't have the luxury of being suspicious. And more than that, she genuinely liked Oliver. The little boy had crawled into her lap during the story, falling asleep with his head on her shoulder, and something about that simple trust had touched something deep inside her. Okay, she said finally. I'll do it. But I want to be clear that this is temporary. I'm not giving up on my career goals. Understood completely, Daniel said, extending his hand. Welcome to the family, Rebecca. As they shook on it, Rebecca felt a flutter of something she couldn't quite name. Excitement maybe, or nervousness, or perhaps just the sense that she was standing at the edge of something significant, even if she couldn't yet see what that something was. If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, you won't want to miss the unexpected turns coming up. Rebecca moved into the Thornton mansion 3 days later with everything she owned, fitting into 2 suitcases and 3 cardboard boxes. Mrs. Chen, a petite woman with kind eyes and an efficiency that was almost military in its precision, helped her unpack and showed her around the house properly. Mr. Thornton is a good man, Mrs. Chen said, as she hung Rebecca's modest wardrobe in a closet that was larger than her entire former bathroom. He works too hard, worries too much, but his heart is in the right place. That little boy, though, he needs more than his father can give him alone. He needs a woman's touch, you know, stability, love. I'll do my best, Rebecca promised, though privately she wondered if her best would be enough. What did she know about raising a child, really? She'd babysat in high school, volunteered at the library's children's section. But this was different. This was full-time responsibility for a traumatized 3-year-old who'd lost his mother before he was even old enough to remember her. Her first full day with Oliver was a disaster. He woke up cranky, refused breakfast, threw a tantrum when she tried to get him dressed for preschool, and by 9 in the morning, both of them were in tears. Rebecca sat on the floor of his bedroom, watching Oliver sob in the corner, and wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Hey, Oliver, she said softly, when his crying had reduced to hiccups. Can I tell you a secret? He looked at her with wet, suspicious eyes, but didn't say no. I'm kind of scared too, Rebecca admitted. This is all new for me. I've never been a nanny before, and I'm probably going to make a lot of mistakes. But I promise I'm trying my best. and I really want us to be friends. Do you think we could try again? Start over." Oliver was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. He stood up on wobbly legs and walked over to her, climbing into her lap with the simple trust that only small children possess. Rebecca wrapped her arms around him and felt something settle in her chest. "How about we make a deal?" she suggested. "Every morning, you can pick one thing you want to do that day, anything you want, as long as it's safe and doesn't involve eating ice cream for every meal." "Park?" Oliver asked hopefully. "Absolutely." "The park sounds perfect." From that moment on, things gradually improved. Rebecca learned Oliver's rhythms, his moods, the things that soothed him and the things that set him off. She discovered he hated loud noises but loved water, that he could spend hours watching ants march across the driveway, that he slept better if she sang old folk songs her grandmother had taught her. Daniel watched this transformation with something close to awe. He'd come home each evening to find his son actually happy, playing and laughing in ways he hadn't since Emma died. And Rebecca, she seemed to bloom too, losing the stressed, hunted look she'd worn that first night at dinner and becoming more confident, more settled, more herself. "You're a miracle worker," he told her one evening after Oliver was asleep. They'd fallen into a routine of having a glass of wine together at the end of each day, comparing notes about Oliver's progress and just talking about everything and nothing. "I'm really not," Rebecca protested. "Oliver's doing all the hard work. I'm just here to support him. Don't sell yourself short. The difference in him is remarkable." He actually smiled at his teacher yesterday. "His teacher called me to make sure it was really my son because apparently he's never smiled at school before." Rebecca laughed. "Well, we had a good morning. He helped me make pancakes, and we only set off the smoke alarm once." "Only once. That's better than my average." Daniel's smile faded slightly. "Rebecca, I want you to know how grateful I am, not just for what you're doing for Oliver, but for bringing life back into this house. It's been so quiet for so long, and now there's laughter again. That means more than I can say. You don't have to thank me. This job, this place, it's saving me just as much as I'm apparently helping you." They looked at each other for a moment, and Rebecca felt that flutter again, that sense of standing on the edge of something. But before either of them could examine it too closely, Mrs. Chen appeared with a message about a call Daniel needed to take, and the moment passed. Weeks turned into months, and Rebecca found herself settling into a life she'd never imagined. The panic about her career faded into the background as she focused on Oliver's needs and found unexpected fulfillment in watching him grow and change. She'd started taking online classes in child development, reading everything she could about trauma and attachment, determined to give this little boy the best care possible. And Daniel, well, Daniel was becoming more than just her employer. They'd started having dinner together most nights, the three of them like a strange little family unit. He'd tell stories about his day at the office, and she'd share Oliver's latest achievements. They'd discovered they both loved old movies, and started a tradition of watching them together after Oliver was asleep, arguing good-naturedly about plot holes and character motivations. Rebecca tried not to think too hard about what it meant that she looked forward to those evenings more than anything else in her day. Tried not to notice the way Daniel's eyes crinkled when he laughed, or how he'd started unconsciously touching her hand when he was making a point, or how the house felt empty on the rare nights when he had to work late. This was temporary, she reminded herself, a stopgap until she figured out her real life. But as spring bloomed into summer and summer faded into fall, Rebecca found herself less and less interested in figuring out what came next. For the first time in years, she was exactly where she wanted to be. That illusion shattered on a cold November morning, almost exactly 1 year after she'd moved in. Rebecca was making breakfast, humming to herself while Oliver colored at the kitchen table, when Daniel came downstairs with an expression she'd never seen before. He looked sick, pale and drawn, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Mrs. Chen, could you take Oliver to the playroom for a few minutes?" Rebecca's stomach dropped. Those 4 words, spoken in that tone, never led anywhere good. She followed Daniel into his study, her mind racing through possibilities. Had she done something wrong? Was he letting her go? Had something happened to the company? "Sit down," Daniel said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as his tell when he was deeply stressed. "I received some news last night, news that's going to change everything." "What kind of news?" "My wife, Emma's family. They're suing for custody of Oliver." Rebecca felt like she'd been punched. "What? Why? On what grounds?" "They claim I'm unfit. That I'm never home. That I've gone through too many caregivers. That Oliver needs stability and family connections that I'm not providing." Daniel's voice was tight with barely contained rage. "They've been building a case for months, apparently, documenting every nanny that quit, every late night I had to work, every time I needed to bring Oliver to the office because I had no other options. But that was before. Things are different now. Oliver's thriving. I know that, you know that, but their lawyers are good and they have evidence of a pattern. The hearing is in 3 weeks, and my attorney says it's not looking good." Rebecca stood up, pacing the length of the study. "There has to be something we can do. Character witnesses, documentation of Oliver's progress, something." "There is one thing," Daniel said slowly. "But it's insane, and I have no right to ask it of you." "What is it?" Daniel met her eyes. "We could get married." The words hung in the air between them, so absurd that Rebecca actually laughed. "You're joking." "I wish I were, but think about it. Their entire case is built on the idea that Oliver lacks stability and a proper family structure. If I were married, if he had a stepmother who clearly loves him and has been in his life for a year, it completely undermines their argument." "Daniel, that's crazy. You can't just marry someone to win a custody case." "People have married for stranger reasons, and it wouldn't be real, not really. Just a legal formality to protect my son. We'd sign a prenup. You'd be financially protected regardless of what happens. And when this is all over, we can quietly annul it or divorce. No harm, no foul." Rebecca stared at him. "You're actually serious. Dead serious." "Rebecca, I know this is insane. I know I'm asking something completely unreasonable, but I'm desperate. I can't lose Oliver. He's all I have left of Emma, and more than that, he's my son. I love him more than anything in this world, and I will do whatever it takes to keep him safe. And you think a fake marriage is the answer?" "I think it gives us a fighting chance. The question is, will you do it? Will you marry me, Rebecca Martinez, in the strangest, most unromantic proposal in history?" Rebecca walked to the window, looking out at the garden where she'd spent so many afternoons playing with Oliver. She thought about the little boy who'd stolen her heart, who called her Becca, because he couldn't quite manage Rebecca, who insisted she read him 3 stories every night and hold his hand until he fell asleep. She thought about losing him, about him being raised by grandparents who saw him as a replacement for the daughter they'd lost, rather than as his own person. And she thought about Daniel, this complicated man who worked too hard and worried too much, but who loved his son with a fierce, protective devotion that had slowly worked its way into her own heart. "If we do this," she said, turning back to face him, "we do it right, no half measures. We have to convince everyone it's real or it won't work." Daniel's eyes widened with hope. "So you'll do it?" "I'll do it, for Oliver. But Daniel, when this is over, when the custody case is settled, we need to talk about what happens next. Really talk, not just assume things will go back to normal." "Agreed." He crossed the room and took her hands in his. "Thank you, Rebecca. I know I don't deserve this, but thank you." They were married 3 days later in a small, private ceremony at City Hall, with only Mrs. Chen and James as witnesses. Rebecca wore a simple cream-colored dress she'd bought the day before, and Daniel gave her a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, a delicate antique with a small diamond that caught the light when she moved her hand. It should have felt wrong. This marriage of convenience, this legal fiction they were creating. But when the judge pronounced them husband and wife, when Daniel lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, Rebecca felt something shift inside her, something that felt dangerously close to real. The custody hearing was brutal. Emma's parents, Richard and Patricia Ashford, had hired a team of lawyers who picked apart every aspect of Daniel's parenting. They brought up the revolving door of nannies, his long work hours, the time Oliver had accidentally locked himself in a bathroom when he was supposed to be napping and Daniel was on a conference call in the next room. But they hadn't counted on Rebecca. She took the stand and spoke with quiet conviction about Oliver's transformation over the past year, about his progress in school, his expanding vocabulary, his growing confidence. She presented photos, teacher reports, even a video of Oliver laughing and playing that she'd taken just the week before. Mrs. Thornton, the Ashfords' lawyer, said with barely concealed condescension, "Isn't it true that you married Mr. Thornton just 2 weeks ago? Rather convenient timing, wouldn't you say?" "I married Daniel because I love him," Rebecca said clearly, "and I love Oliver." The timing had nothing to do with this case and everything to do with finally being ready to make that commitment. And yet, you've only been in Oliver's life for a year. His grandparents have been present since he was born. Present at a distance, Rebecca countered. When was the last time they took Oliver to the park, read him a bedtime story, sat with him when he had a nightmare? I can tell you the last time I did all those things. Yesterday. The hearing lasted 3 days, and by the end, everyone was exhausted. The judge took 2 weeks to make her decision, 2 weeks during which Rebecca and Daniel barely slept, clinging to each other and to Oliver like lifelines in a storm. When the verdict finally came, it was in their favor. The judge ruled that Oliver was clearly thriving in his current environment, and that removing him would cause unnecessary trauma. The Ashfords were granted supervised visitation twice a month, but primary custody remained with Daniel. They celebrated that night with pizza and ice cream, Oliver blissfully unaware of how close he'd come to being taken away. After he was asleep, Rebecca and Daniel sat in the living room, the relief so profound it was almost painful. "We did it," Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. "God, Rebecca, we actually did it." "We did," she agreed. Then, because it needed to be said, "So what happens now?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "I suppose we should discuss the annulment. That was the deal, wasn't it? This was temporary. Is that what you want?" "I don't know what I want anymore," Daniel admitted. He turned to look at her, really look at her, and Rebecca saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "No, that's a lie. I know exactly what I want. I want you to stay. Not as Oliver's nanny, not as my fake wife, but as my real wife. I want to fall asleep next to you every night and wake up to you every morning. I want to build a life with you, a real life, if you'll have me." Rebecca's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Daniel, we barely know each other. This whole thing started as a transaction. Maybe it did. But somewhere along the way it became more, at least for me. Tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me I'm crazy for wanting this, and I'll call the lawyer tomorrow and start the annulment paperwork." But Rebecca couldn't tell him that, because it would be a lie. The truth was, she'd fallen in love with Daniel Thornton somewhere between the subway car and the custody hearing, between the late-night movie marathons and the early morning pancake disasters, between watching him be a father and discovering the man beneath the CEO exterior. "You're not crazy," she whispered. "Or if you are, then I am too, because I want the same thing." Daniel's face transformed, the worry and exhaustion replaced by pure joy. He reached for her, cupping her face in his hands. "Can I kiss you? A real kiss this time, not for show." Rebecca nodded, and when his lips met hers, it felt like coming home. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, then deeper, more certain, filled with all the words they hadn't yet found the courage to say. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Rebecca Thornton. I think I've loved you since that day on the subway when you saw a problem and walked straight toward it instead of away. That's who you are. Someone who shows up, who cares, who makes everything better just by being present." "I love you too," Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face. "I love you and Oliver and this crazy, unexpected life we've built. I don't want to go back to who I was before. I want to stay exactly here." They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, until the sound of small feet padding down the stairs made them pull apart. Oliver appeared in the doorway, his stuffed elephant tucked under one arm, looking worried. "Becca, cry?" he asked, his voice small. "Happy tears, baby," Rebecca assured him, opening her arms. Oliver climbed into her lap, and Daniel wrapped his arms around both of them, creating a circle of warmth and safety. "Family," Oliver announced, satisfied. "Yes," Daniel agreed. "Family." The next few months were a revelation. Now that they'd acknowledged what was between them, everything changed. Daniel started coming home earlier, delegating more at work, determined not to miss the small moments that made up a life. They had real date nights, leaving Oliver with Mrs. Chen and rediscovering what it meant to just be a couple. Rebecca discovered that beneath the serious CEO exterior, Daniel had a wicked sense of humor and an unexpected talent for terrible puns that made her groan and laugh in equal measure. He learned that she sang in the shower, always burned toast no matter how carefully she watched it, and had a habit of reading the ends of mystery novels first because she couldn't stand the suspense. They fought too, real fights about real things. About Daniel's tendency to solve every problem with money. About Rebecca's inability to ask for help when she needed it. About how to handle Oliver's occasional tantrums and his growing questions about his mother. But they learned to fight fair, to listen, to compromise, to remember that they were on the same team. Oliver flourished in the stability. His vocabulary exploded, his confidence grew, and his teachers reported that he was becoming a leader in his preschool class. He started calling Rebecca Mama, naturally, without prompting. And the first time it happened, she'd cried for an hour while Daniel held her and told her Emma would have loved her. They visited Emma's grave together on what would have been her birthday. Daniel introduced Rebecca to his late wife, his voice thick with emotion, and Rebecca laid flowers on the headstone and silently promised to love and care for the family Emma had left behind. "Emma would have liked you," Daniel said as they walked back to the car, Oliver running ahead to chase butterflies. "She always said I needed someone who could call me on my nonsense, someone who wouldn't let me hide behind work and responsibility. That's you." "I wish I could have known her," Rebecca said honestly. "Me too. But Rebecca, loving you doesn't mean I love her less. It just means my heart is big enough for both. Is that okay?" "It's more than okay. It's perfect." Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Rebecca officially gave up her job search, no longer interested in returning to her old career path. Instead, she started volunteering at Oliver's school, then got involved with a nonprofit that provided books and literacy programs to underprivileged children. She found purpose and fulfillment in ways she never had in her previous corporate aspirations. Daniel's company continued to thrive, but he'd learned to balance work and family, to be present for the moments that mattered. He coached Oliver's tiny soccer team, attended every school event, and made it a point to have breakfast with his family every single morning, no matter what meetings were scheduled. They took family vacations, traveled to places Rebecca had only dreamed of seeing. Oliver's first trip to Disney World, a summer in Europe where they showed him castles and museums and gelato shops, a winter in Aspen where Daniel taught both Rebecca and Oliver to ski with varying degrees of success. Mrs. Chen and James became more than employees. They were family, present for every birthday and holiday. Oliver's unofficial grandparents who spoiled him shamelessly and loved him fiercely. Even the Ashfords eventually came around. Their twice-monthly visits became genuine opportunities to connect with their grandson. And while the relationship with Daniel remained strained, They developed a grudging respect for Rebecca and the mother she'd become to Oliver. 1 year turned into 2, then 3. Oliver started kindergarten, learned to ride a bike, lost his first tooth. Rebecca and Daniel celebrated anniversaries, the fake one from the courthouse wedding, and the real one they set for the night they'd first confessed their feelings. And through it all, Rebecca never forgot the subway ride that had changed everything. Sometimes, when she was riding the train for work or errands, she'd look around at the other passengers and wonder about their stories. How many of them were one act of kindness away from a completely different life? How many were one brave decision away from happiness? It was on one of these train rides, 5 years after that first encounter, that Rebecca saw a young man struggling with twin toddlers who were both crying at top volume. The other passengers were doing what New Yorkers do, pointedly ignoring the chaos and cranking up their headphones. Rebecca smiled to herself, then reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She'd kept that animated animal app, updated it over the years, used it with Oliver when he was younger. Now she approached the frazzled father and said the same words that had once been said to her. "Excuse me, would you mind if I tried something?" The young man looked at her with desperate hope, and Rebecca showed the twins the dancing animals. Within minutes, their crying had turned to giggles, and the man was looking at her like she'd performed a miracle. "Thank you," he said, his voice cracking with relief. "You have no idea what a difference that made." "Actually," Rebecca said with a knowing smile, "I think I do." She rode the train home thinking about circles, about how kindness given comes back in unexpected ways, about how the smallest actions can ripple out into profound changes. When she walked into her house that evening, she was greeted by the sound of laughter. Daniel and Oliver were in the kitchen, apparently attempting to bake cookies with results that looked more like modern art than dessert. "Mama!" Oliver shouted, running to hug her. He was 8 now, tall for his age, with Daniel's dark hair and Emma's bright smile. "Dad's burning the cookies again." "They're not burned, they're caramelized," Daniel protested, pulling a tray of definitely burned cookies from the oven. When he saw Rebecca, his whole face lit up in a way that still made her heart skip. "How was your day?" "Perfect," she said, kissing him hello and stealing one of the less burned cookies. "Absolutely perfect." That night, after Oliver was tucked in and the kitchen was cleaned, Rebecca and Daniel sat on their back porch watching the stars. These quiet moments, stolen at the end of busy days, were some of Rebecca's favorites. No agenda, no pressure, just the two of them and the life they'd built together. "I got a call from the Ashfords today," Daniel said, taking her hand. "They want to take Oliver for a week this summer, show him where Emma grew up, introduce him to extended family." "How do you feel about that?" "Nervous, but also good. They're his grandparents, and they've really made an effort these past few years. Emma would want him to know that side of his family." He paused. "Plus, a week alone with my wife. I can think of worse fates." Rebecca laughed. "Are you propositioning me, Mr. Thornton?" "Always, Mrs. Thornton, always." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Rebecca said, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "Oliver's getting older. The house feels big sometimes, empty. And I know this is a big conversation, but I wondered how you'd feel about possibly, considering adding to our family." Daniel turned to look at her, his eyes wide. "You mean a baby?" "Maybe, if you want to. I know it's complicated, with Emma and everything that happened, and if you're not ready, that's completely fine. I just thought I'd put it out there." Daniel was quiet for so long that Rebecca started to worry she'd overstepped. But then he smiled, soft and genuine. "I think Emma would love that. Another child for Oliver to grow up with, to teach and protect. And Rebecca, the idea of having a baby with you, of going through that whole journey together. That sounds amazing. Yeah, let's do it. Let's expand this crazy, beautiful family of ours." Rebecca felt tears spring to her eyes. "I love you so much." I love you too. More than I ever thought possible." He pulled her into his arms. "Thank you for walking through that curtain on the subway. Thank you for showing up in our lives and deciding to stay. Thank you for seeing me," Rebecca whispered. "For taking a chance on a stranger who helped your kid. For building this life with me." 10 months later, Rebecca gave birth to a healthy baby girl they named Emma Grace, after Daniel's first wife and Rebecca's grandmother. Oliver was instantly smitten with his baby sister, insisting on helping with every feeding and diaper change, singing her the same songs Rebecca had once sung to him. The first time Daniel held his daughter, he cried. Not the devastated tears he'd shed when the first Emma died, but tears of joy and gratitude, of second chances and new beginnings. Rebecca watched him with their daughter, watched Oliver hover protectively nearby, and felt a contentment so profound it was almost overwhelming. "We're going to be okay," Daniel said, looking up at her with wonder in his eyes. "All of us. We're going to be more than okay." "We already are," Rebecca assured him. And they were. Not perfect, never perfect. Because perfect was an illusion, and real life was messy and complicated and full of unexpected challenges. But they were happy. They were loved. They were family. Baby Emma grew into a toddler with her father's determination and her mother's gentle spirit. Oliver became an incredible big brother, reading to his sister and teaching her everything he knew. Daniel continued to build his company while making sure work never came before family. And Rebecca found joy in the small moments, the daily rhythms of life with people she loved. On their 7th anniversary, Daniel surprised Rebecca with a trip back to the subway car where it had all begun. He'd rented the entire car somehow, filled it with flowers and photographs from their years together. Oliver and Emma were there, dressed up and giggling, along with Mrs. Chen and James and even the Ashfords, who'd flown in for the occasion. 7 years ago, Daniel said, standing in the center of the car while Rebecca looked around in amazement. "A woman I didn't know did something extraordinary. She saw someone struggling and decided to help. No questions asked, no expectations of return. That act of kindness changed my life, changed Oliver's life, and eventually created this incredible family we have now." He got down on one knee, pulling out a new ring, a band to complement the antique engagement ring she still wore. "Rebecca Martinez Thornton, will you marry me again? For real this time, with all our family watching, with full hearts and no doubts." Rebecca was crying, laughing, nodding all at once. Yes. Always yes. They renewed their vows right there on the subway car, with Oliver and Emma as witnesses, as the train sat still in the station and other passengers peered through the windows in confusion and delight. It was ridiculous and perfect, and exactly like them. As they kissed, as their children cheered and their family clapped, as the conductor announced over the speaker that love was in the air on the downtown express, Rebecca thought about alternate universes, about the version of herself that might have kept her head down that day, that might have ignored a crying child and a desperate father, that might have let fear and propriety keep her from getting involved, that Rebecca would have ended up somewhere, probably still working in libraries or corporate offices, probably still fine in the way that people are fine when they're going through the motions of life without really living it. She might have been happy eventually, in a different way with different people. But this Rebecca, the one who had walked through that curtain and decided to care, had found something beyond happiness. She'd found purpose and family, and a love that grew deeper every day. She'd found home in a place she never expected, with people she never planned for, through a series of events that seemed random, but felt like destiny. If you've made it this far in our story, thank you for staying with us through every twist and turn. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story about unexpected journeys and the courage to take chances. Drop a comment below telling us what you thought about Rebecca and Daniel's story, and let us know where you're watching from. Your support means everything to us. Years continued to pass in that beautiful, terrifying way they do. Oliver grew into a thoughtful teenager who still remembered the early days when Rebecca first came into his life. He'd sometimes thank her out of nowhere, telling her how grateful he was that she'd been brave enough to help a stranger on a subway. "You saved us," he said once, on a quiet Sunday morning when it was just the two of them making breakfast. He was 15 now, nearly as tall as Daniel, but in these moments he was still her little boy. Dad was drowning, and he didn't even know it. And then you showed up. "You helped save me too," Rebecca told him honestly. "I was lost, Oliver. I had no direction, no real purpose. You and your dad gave me that, so we saved each other. I think that's exactly what we did." Emma grew into a bright, curious child who loved books as much as her mother and business strategy as much as her father. She was 7 now, missing her 2 front teeth and convinced she was going to be either a veterinarian or the president, possibly both. Daniel's hair had started going gray at the temples, something Rebecca found unbearably attractive and told him frequently. He'd sold his company for an amount of money that was frankly obscene, then immediately started a foundation focused on supporting single parents and children who'd lost parents. It was his way of honoring Emma's memory and acknowledging how many others were walking similar paths. Rebecca had written a children's book, a story about a brave little boy who learned to open his heart after loss. It had been published by a small press and hadn't sold particularly well. But the letters she received from families dealing with grief made it worth more than any bestseller list ever could. They still lived in the same house in Westchester, though they'd made it more their own over the years. Emma's paintings covered the walls now, alongside Oliver's photography and family pictures that documented every stage of their journey. The garden had expanded, and Rebecca spent hours there with the kids, teaching them about plants and growth and patience. Mrs. Chen had retired, though she still came for dinner every Sunday, bringing her famous dumplings and arguing with Rebecca about cooking techniques in the way of old friends. James still drove for them occasionally, but mostly he'd moved to Florida with his wife, sending postcards that Oliver collected on a bulletin board in his room. The Ashfords had become genuine family members, their earlier antagonism transformed into respect and affection. Richard had taught Oliver to play chess, and Patricia took Emma shopping and told her stories about the grandmother she'd never met. It wasn't perfect, but it was real and good, and more than anyone had expected. On what would have been Emma's 40th birthday, they all visited her grave together. Oliver brought flowers, Emma brought a drawing she'd made, and Daniel brought a letter he'd written, tucking it under a stone by the headstone. "I told her about everything," Daniel explained to Rebecca later. "About how happy we are, about the kids, about the foundation. I told her that loving you didn't mean forgetting her, and I thanked her for somehow knowing that this was what I'd need." "Do you ever wish things had been different?" Rebecca asked. "That she had lived, that you'd had the life you planned?" Daniel considered the question seriously. "I wish she hadn't died. I wish Oliver had gotten to know his mother. And I wish she could see the amazing person he's become. I wish she could have met Emma Grace, her namesake. But do I wish you and I had never met? Never, Rebecca. Not for a second. Life doesn't give us the choice between perfect and flawed. It gives us the choice between closed off and open, between safe and courageous. You taught me to be open and courageous, and I'll never regret that." Rebecca's parents had moved to New York a few years ago, wanting to be closer to their grandchildren. Her father and Daniel had become unlikely friends, bonding over golf and terrible dad jokes. Her mother had taken over organizing all family celebrations with the same enthusiasm she'd shown at that first disastrous dinner, and Rebecca had learned to just surrender to it. Life wasn't without its challenges. Oliver went through a rough patch in middle school, struggling with questions about identity and belonging that every teenager faces, but that felt more acute for him with his complicated history. Rebecca and Daniel had found a wonderful therapist who helped him work through it and came out the other side stronger and more self-aware. Emma had inherited some health issues that required monitoring, occasional hospitalizations that terrified them all, but she faced everything with remarkable courage, and those experiences made them appreciate the ordinary days even more. Daniel still worked too much sometimes, falling back into old patterns when he was stressed. Rebecca still struggled with asking for help, with accepting that she didn't have to be perfect to be enough. But they called each other on it, gently but firmly, and they were both better for it. On their 10th anniversary, they threw a huge party. The subway car rental company apparently still talked about them, and this time they had the party at home, with everyone who mattered. Friends, family, colleagues, neighbors, teachers, all the people who'd become part of their story. Oliver, now 13 and suddenly looking so grown up, gave a toast. "I don't remember my biological mother," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "But I know she loved me because my dad tells me stories. And I know she'd be happy that Rebecca is my mom now, because Rebecca loves me like I'm hers. She chose me, chose us, when she didn't have to. That's real love. That's real family. So here's to my parents, who prove every day that family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up, over and over, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Rebecca hugged Oliver tight, whispering thank you over and over, while Daniel's arm came around both of them and Emma squeezed in to make it a full family embrace. Later that night, after all the guests had gone and the kids were asleep, Rebecca and Daniel slow danced in their living room to no music, just the sound of each other's breathing and the settling house around them. 10 years, Daniel marveled. Feels like both forever and no time at all. I know what you mean. Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life. That you're my husband, that Oliver and Emma are my children, that this is real. It's real, Daniel assured her. Most real thing I've ever known. He pulled back to look at her. You know what I think about sometimes? What? All the little choices that had to line up for us to meet. If I'd taken a different train that day. If Oliver hadn't had a meltdown at that exact moment. If you'd been too absorbed in your book to notice. If you hadn't been brave enough to approach a stranger, any one of those variables changes, and we never happen. Are you going philosophical on me, Mr. Thornton? Maybe. I just want you to know that I don't take any of this for granted. Not a single day, not a single moment. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Rebecca. You and the life we've built together. You're the best thing that happened to me too, Rebecca said softly. You and Oliver and Emma, and this beautiful, complicated, perfect, imperfect family we've created. They stood there swaying in the dim light. Two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way and decided to build something extraordinary. Outside, the world kept turning, trains kept running, strangers kept passing strangers without a second glance. But inside this house, in this moment, was everything that mattered. Love given freely, family chosen and cherished, second chances seized with both hands, and the quiet knowledge that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk through a curtain and offer help to someone who needs it. Because you never know where that courage might lead. You never know what extraordinary things might bloom from one simple act of kindness. You never know how many lives you might change, including your own. Rebecca thought about the girl she'd been on that subway 10 years ago, broke and scared and uncertain about everything. If she could go back and tell that girl what was coming, she probably wouldn't believe it. The mansion in Westchester, the brilliant husband, the two incredible children, the purposeful work, the deep contentment that came from finally being exactly where she was meant to be. But she wouldn't go back, wouldn't change a single thing, not even the hard parts, because the hard parts had taught her strength. The uncertainty had taught her faith. The fear had taught her courage. And the act of showing up, day after day, had taught her what love really meant. What are you thinking about? Daniel asked, feeling her drift into her own thoughts. Everything. Nothing. How lucky we are. How grateful I am that Oliver had a meltdown that day. Daniel laughed. Should we tell him that we're grateful for his childhood tantrums? Maybe when he's 30. They finally headed upstairs to bed, checking on both kids as they always did. Oliver was sprawled across his bed, headphones still in even though he'd fallen asleep, a book about photography open on his chest. Rebecca gently removed the headphones and marked his place in the book, kissing his forehead the way she had since he was 3. Emma was curled up with about 17 stuffed animals, her nightlight casting stars across the ceiling. Daniel tucked her blanket more securely around her shoulders, and Emma stirred slightly, murmuring, "Love you, Daddy," without fully waking. "Love you too, sweetness," he whispered back. In their own bedroom, they got ready for sleep with the comfortable routine of long married couples. No makeup for Rebecca, just the simple moisturizer she'd used for years. Reading glasses for Daniel, who'd finally admitted he needed them. 2 books on 2 nightstands, a glass of water, the alarm set for the morning chaos of getting everyone to school and work on time. "Same time tomorrow?" Rebecca asked as they settled into bed. Debbie wouldn't miss it for the world. She turned off the light, and they curled together in the darkness, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys. Oliver had a math test he was worried about. Emma had a school play where she'd be a talking tree. Daniel had a foundation meeting. Rebecca had a volunteer shift at the literacy center. But right now, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. A family asleep under one roof, hearts that had found each other against all odds, a love that had started with a simple question, "May I help?" and had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. Before sleep claimed them both, Rebecca whispered one more thing. "Thank you for saying yes that day, for taking a chance on me." Daniel's response was drowsy but certain. "Best decision I ever made." Well, second best. First was getting on that subway car in the first place. Rebecca smiled in the darkness. "Guess we should thank Oliver's preschool for being on that particular train line. Remind me to send them a donation." And with that, they drifted off to sleep. 2 people who'd been strangers on a train and were now partners in everything that mattered. Their breathing synchronized, their hands linked beneath the covers, their dreams filled with tomorrow's possibilities and yesterday's gratitude. Outside, New York City hummed with its millions of stories, millions of near misses and chance encounters, millions of people making choices that would ripple out in ways they couldn't imagine. Somewhere, a subway car was carrying passengers through the dark tunnels, strangers sharing space without touching lives. But in one house in Westchester County, 4 people slept peacefully, bound together by courage and kindness, by choice and love, by all the small decisions that had led them to exactly where they needed to be. And if you could have asked any of them if they'd do it all again, if they'd get on that subway car, if they'd approach that stranger, if they'd take that chance on an impossible situation, the answer would have been the same from all of them. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Because the best stories don't start with once upon a time. They start with someone being brave enough to care about a stranger. And they end not with happily ever after, but with happily right now, choosing each other over and over, building something beautiful from unexpected beginnings. This is their story. And somewhere out there, on a subway car or a bus or a street corner, someone else's story is just beginning. All it takes is one moment of courage, one decision to help, one willingness to see another person struggle and do something about it. That's how miracles happen. That's how families form. That's how strangers become soulmates. One subway ride at a time. Thank you so much for staying with us through this incredible journey. If Rebecca and Daniel's story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon so you never miss another story about love, second chances, and the courage to change your life. Leave a comment telling us your favorite part of their story, and let us know what city you're watching from. Your comments and support inspire us to keep bringing you these heartfelt stories. Until next time, remember that your one act of kindness could change everything, for someone else and for yourself. See you in the next story.